All right. Welcome everyone to the Master Food Preserver third Thursday demonstration. These demonstrations are brought to you by our Master Food Preserver volunteers. Without them, we wouldn't have a Master Food Preserver program in Humboldt and Del Norte counties. And just real quick, the Master Food Preserver program is from the University of California Cooperative Extension Program. Not every county in California has a Master Food Preserver program, so we're very fortunate to have so many volunteers that are willing to give us their time and energy for this program. All that we do is to assist our community in bringing safe food preservation practices, research-based preservation practices to the counties, and in order to address issues that are related to preservation practices that are outdated, preservation practices that are not safe. So that's the service we provide to our community. So thank you all for making this happen. And just a real quick, we have been able to adapt to this virtual world because of the pandemic. One of those examples are these third Thursday demonstrations on in the virtual world. And two, that is true for our new cohort of what we like to affectionately call ferments here in Humboldt and Del Norte counties. So the new people who are being trained to be certified master food preservers in Humboldt and Del Norte counties are also doing their training online in part. So we have a lot of folks, we have 21 folks participating from Humboldt Del Norte County this year. So it's really quite wonderful to have them joining us. So I'll share one more thing. Oops, I almost forgot. So I'm asking everybody to mute themselves, or I will mute you as soon as I get done sharing this. And there will be sections during today's presentation where I will check chat for your questions of Joyce and Anne. Please don't unmute yourself to ask the question, but please add your questions to chat. And then I will, at the end of a certain section, we'll stop for questions. And at the end of another section, we'll stop for questions. So I just wanted to share that with you. If you have any questions at all during the presentation, put it in there, even if it's about Zoom. So I hope to be able to assist you along the way. And I will give it over to Ann Anderson and Joyce Houston. Thank you.
I know. I thought I was going to be the main frame, but oh, there I am. Oh my goodness. Okay. Hi, I'm Joyce Houston and a master food preserver. And we're going to talk about freezing foods tonight. And freezing is a very versatile way of preserving food in that there are so many things that you can freeze. In fact, you can freeze just about anything. Now, what you get out of the freezer may not be what you expect, but what we want to teach you tonight is how you can freeze many different foods, whether they be individual items or mixed foods, and have a quality product when you take it out to eat. The thing that is nice about freezing is that it's quick. You don't have to get out a whole lot of equipment. You don't have to seal the foods into a jar like you do with canning, and it is still very safe. The freezing inactivates any kind of pathogens. Now you might notice that I said inactivate because it does not kill them. Okay, it kills insects if you happen to have any of those in your food, which I hope you do not, but it does not kill them. It inactivates them so that when the food is taken out of the freezer, it needs to be used once it is defrosted. It also slows down the enzymes in foods and prevents the growth of microorganisms. Again, these being just inactivated, not killed. The quality of your various foods are going to vary depending on your tastes. And so how you freeze foods and what you freeze, again, is going to be dependent on what you like to eat or your family. A few things that you have to do is for vegetables and for some foods, you want to blanch them. And we'll get into that. Anne's going to talk about that a little later. And then that's usually vegetables. And then they are frozen. And then the other thing that is very important is packaging. And different kinds of packaging can be used with different foods. And I'll show you a wide variety of packaging options that are available today. And then of course, and this is really important, and I know that I have suffered from not doing this a few times, and that is labeling. Whenever you are going to freeze a food, you want to make sure you put a label on it that is going to stay on the package and is going to say what it is and the date that you put it in the freezer. I know that there have been a few times when I've thought, I'm not going to forget what this is. And then I forget what it is. And when it comes out, I think, I have no idea what this is, because in its frozen state, it looks so entirely different. Storage times can vary, but I want you to know that you can really store any frozen food for an almost unlimited time. It's just that as the time gets longer, the quality goes down. So it is good to look at some of the recommended time limits on some of those foods if you want to have a high quality product. And if you're not planning to just put it into a soup or a stew and you're not going to really know what the texture is for sure. Now, I want to make sure that you've all gotten the handouts that have been provided. The one on freezing and food safety is a very good general piece of information on food safety with freezing. The freezing vegetables and freezing fruits gives some very specific information for each of those areas and talks about defrosting and how to use the different products as you are taking them out of the freezer. And then at the back of each one of these, and so, let's say the vegetables in particular, tells you the blanching times that you are recommended to use in order to have a top quality product when you're freezing it. The freezing fruit, you don't usually blanch. In fact, you do not blanch fruit, but it does have lots of information about specific fruits that you probably will find useful. And then the cold food storage chart, we're not really talking a lot about cold food storage. So this is a handy chart for you to know how long food should be kept in the refrigerator. And there are some guides in here for freezing foods also, storing freezing foods, frozen food. Wow. Okay. So any questions from the audience now? You want to put them down in chat, and you will also be getting, I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Dorina, you're still going to send out the handout about foods that do not freeze well?
Yes, because I completely forgot to copy that and send it to all of you lovely folks. So I will be doing that as a follow-up.
Okay. Now that is a list of foods that are recommended, as not being so great to freeze. However, use your own discretion, because some of the foods that are on that list, when I looked at it, I thought, I freeze them, and for what I want to use them for, it works just great. So do look at them. And also, there may be some foods that you use a lot in a particular form. And if you want to try freezing it, I'd say freeze a small amount first if you haven't done it before. Take it out and see how well it turns out for what you want to use it for. If it turns out fine, there is absolutely nothing wrong with freezing it. It will preserve it. Okay? So Anne, what do you think? You want to make some broth?
I do. Let me show you. Here's a little helpful hint. If you want to make vegetable broth and you find that spending $5 for a package at the store is something more than you want to spend, what I do is when I'm cooking, I save scraps. So I've got all kinds of frozen scraps in this gallon Ziploc bag. And things you can put in to add to your vegetable broth are things like tops of onions, tops of scallions, tops and bottoms of celery, carrots, carrot peels, asparagus, mushroom stems, garlic cloves, corn cobs, beet greens, chard, parsnips, pea pods, eggplant, mushrooms. And you can also use things like if you have some fresh herbs that you're using, maybe some parsley about something and you don't use all of it, you can just throw that in as well. So I've got this big bag of frozen scraps and I'm gonna pour it into my pot.
I guess the one thing you want to make sure is that if you're going to save scraps like that, make sure you wash them really well before you put them in a bag to preserve them in your freezer.
Oh, good idea, good idea. So you just want to put it in and bring it back to boil and then simmer for about 30 minutes. There are, however, a few vegetables that you want to avoid. The main thing is what they call the cruciferous vegetables, and those would be the cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts,
Broccoli.
what else? Broccoli. They will tend to create a bitter broth. Also, if you put in things like green beans or zucchini for too long a time, it will also get to be bitter. So that is good. Oh, also, you can put in potato peels, but they will make it cloudy. If you don't mind a cloudy broth, that's fine, but if you want a clear broth, don't do that. So what we're gonna do, we're not gonna spend the whole time here doing this, but I'm just putting this in here. And once it's simmered for about half an hour, we'll strain it out and in a colander and catch the liquid and throw away the solids. So
You know,
I
one thing
Yeah,
I forgot to say
Yeah.
at the beginning is anytime any of you are going to be working with foods, make sure you wash your hands well with soap and water before you start. And I know Ann and I both did, and I'm hoping that you will all do that too.
Right, and also clean your counters and things. Yeah, so what I'm not gonna suffer through 30 minutes of cooking. So I've already got some broth that's already done. And you wanna, one of the containers you can use is a mason jar. This is a quart mason jar. And you wanna use at least an inch of headspace. So what I did is I froze some yesterday. And let me tell you what happened. It was kind of a shock to me. Because I measured the headspace quite diligently, and one of the tools you can use is a common canning tool. Has little notches with different levels. So the biggest one is 1 inch, so you can measure that you have 1 inch of headspace here. Well, I measured my headspace, and I took out that jar this morning, and it's cracked. So that's why you need the headspace. You won't crack it. So next time I'm gonna leave a little more than 1 inch. I don't know why that didn't work, but
So tell
What?
me, Ann, have you opened it up to see how high the liquid is in your jar?
no,
You know how
I'm
close to
afraid
the lid?
if the cracks go all the way up, I'm afraid to open it.
Oh, okay,
But-
got it.
but, yeah, I'm just gonna put it in the sink and let it thaw out and then just throw it away. So make sure you do have enough headspace. So you can freeze in any size jar. I mean, it can be, a pint, or it can be a little jar. Or what's cool if you're making broth is you can freeze a broth in an ice cube tray. So if you feel like you want to use that broth to make a gravy or a sauce and you don't need a quart, you just need a little, then you can just freeze these, pop them out, put them in a bag, and then just use what you want to use when you want to use it. So that's cool. Joyce, do you have any other suggestions on freezing the
Well,
liquid?
the thing that I wanted to mention was the reason that you do want to have that headspace is because, of course, it expands. And that's why I was curious as to how close to the very top of your jar that came with the 1 inch. And I think a lot of the time that 1 inch should be plenty. And I know of people who have kind of accidentally maybe used the small mouth jars. And I have a knowledge of someone who lost a whole bunch of jars. So it didn't go all the way up, did it?
No, it didn't.
So that had to be a weak jar, I would think.
Maybe that was the case. There's another point. Inspect your jars before you use them.
Yeah,
And-
yeah.
And also use Kerr or Ball or regular canning jars. If you just take an old jar from some spaghetti sauce you had sometime or other, you can't guarantee that those jars are going to be strong enough. And they can break more easily. So be careful on the quality of jars you're doing.
That's right. And not only that, but the neck on some of those other jars are smaller and it creates more pressure on the sides.
Right. Mercy, can you find a jar with a small neck? Yeah. But there's two jars I want to show you.
With a wider neck, it will melt out of the thing.
Right. This is a narrow, it's a regular, what they call a regular mouth jar, and this is a wide mouth. And so the wide mouths come in different sizes, half a pint, even up to a gallon or more.
I'm gonna have to dispute that. That 8-ounce jar there, even though it is the small mouth, it does not have the shoulder. It does not have the shoulder. So you can actually use those to freeze in. And in fact, I have very successfully. But
Oh yeah, I'm going to show that too.
you
But
just want to
here-
make sure you have enough headspace.
Here's an example of a jar with a narrow mouth that's got
Right.
the shoulders on it. So one of the reasons to have a wide mouth is that you can get the stuff out of the container. What I'm going to do is, here's another kind of liquid. It's actually tomatoes with some basil and garlic in it that I froze from last summer. And I'm going to use that in the soup. But it has the wide mouth, and I'm going to thaw it out. And Joyce can talk about thawing some more. Then I'm just going to take a big container of hot water. It's just going to be hot from the sink. It's not going to be boiling. So let me get
Add that to the soup stock.
Huh?
The thing that is important for people to know, the best way to thaw your liquids, or actually to thaw just about anything really, of the vegetable nature or of your soup or stew nature, is to thaw it in the refrigerator. It is not a good idea to thaw it on the counter or in your microwave, unless you can thaw it in the microwave if you are going to be cooking it right away. The counter is not recommended at any time. And the reason is that you have different parts of it thawing and becoming liquid or soft much sooner than others. And as a result, those outer layers can actually get to a point where they will enhance the growth of microbes, and you could end up with a real problem with your food. The other way that you can defrost would be in something like a bowl, or I guess if you wanted a sink, of cold water, not hot, not warm, cold water. And then you would want to be changing that about every half an hour. You don't want the water to warm up. And that helps to thaw it more quickly. But again, if you thaw using that method, it is recommended that you use that product right away. You don't, then refrigerate it for a couple of days even. You are going to use it that day. It's actually similar instructions to how you thaw correctly a turkey or any other piece of meat.
Shall I go ahead and ask a few questions?
Sure, why
All
not?
right. So there was a question about the sauce pan, and in the beginning, you had poured your vegetables into the saucepan, and I answered that it was water. But do you have a proportional kind of guidance for folks on about how much water to about how many vegetables?
I usually put about a gallon worth of vegetables, like a gallon Ziploc, and then just cover them.
With water.
Just make sure it's covered with water.
Great.
So it might be a gallon and a half, gallon, whatever.
Great, thank you. Another question was, would a touch of a lemon before freezing remove any of that bitterness from the brassicas?
I don't have a clue.
That's a good question. I don't know either, but I think that we ought to experiment with it and find out. I'm all in for experimentation.
Yeah, great. And another question, I think for you, Anne, did you just put the tomatoes in the jar to freeze them, or was there some processing that was done first?
Well, I peeled the skins off. So I blanched them for less than a minute to just take the peels off. And then I added some garlic and I added some basil just because I wanted the flavoring. And then I just put them in the jar, but I didn't cook them ahead of time.
All right. That's all the questions for now.
A couple of things that I've frozen over the years. This one jar, the pint and a half jar, is it's tomatoes that have been roasted with various spices and garlic and other things. And it is a recipe that is not really approved for canning, and yet I like it. And so I don't can it. No, it's okay. It's okay, Dorina. You don't have to put your fingers in your ears. I don't can it. I don't can it. What I do is I freeze it. I cook it. It's ready to use. It's very thick, so I'll be thinning it out with possibly some plain tomatoes and a little bit of wine when I'm using it. And then it's perfectly fine and it's ready to use. The other thing is my daughter gave me a whole bunch of oranges. And so I decided, all right, fresh squaz orange juice. So I've got some orange juice here that I can defrost and use. And it's very, very delicious, of course.
And with liquids, what's your recommended headspace?
It's usually somewhere between a half and an inch.
Okay.
And this, I don't remember, looks like it was an inch.
And remind me, what is headspace?
Ah, thank you, Dorina. The headspace is the distance between the top of the liquid and the top of the jar. And if you look at your jars, the regular canning jars, let's see, where's a bigger one? Oh, my bigger one disappeared. Okay, here's a little one.
I have a
Okay,
here.
good. You can show them where the different inches are then. Down there is an inch. That's an inch headspace right there where Anne's finger is. And then half of that would be half an inch. Right.
Right. So
And you don't want it to be any more full than that, because you have expansion of any kind of food that has a liquid in it, and you can just blow the top, or you can break the jar. And one thing I didn't say anything about was the lids that I have used on these jars that I just frozen, I have not canned, are a plastic lid, actually, that Ball sells. This one that they currently have, I don't know, whoops, they are slippery. I don't know if they are still making the white one. It kind of had a tendency to leak, but the black ones that they now have available do have more of a seal on the inside, and they're not supposed to, and I've not found that they leak at all. So these are another option. And the thing that's nice about using them, of course, you can use old seals and then a ring like this. But when you use those, there is a possibility of rusting. And so it's a good way to avoid something like that.
Yeah, Joyce, I saw online all kind of colored lids from Ball now. Every color in the rainbow. I don't know if
Really?
anybody's used them. I haven't, but they're awfully pretty.
Are they plastic or are they the metal?
Yeah, plastic. They're plastic.
Oh, all right. I'll have to look.
Yeah, they're cool. Okay, so I think we've done our liquids. Is that right, Joy? Anything else? Oh,
Done your tomatoes.
oh my gosh. Any other liquids that you want to talk about freezing, Joyce?
I
think you said you freeze juice, right?
I just showed them that.
Oh, you showed that. And then other things that are sort of liquids would be like sauces.
Which I did. I showed them.
Oh, okay. Well,
Where were you, Ann? Did you leave?
I was slaving over dirty dishes. I can't.
Did
tell
you? I think we're down to getting to the blanching of the vegetables.
Under the vegetables. Okay, well, we're gonna blanch vegetables. And like I said, in this process, we're gonna end up making soup. I already poured the broth into the blue soup pot here. And the first thing we're going to do is blanch and prepare green beans. So I
SF7 is, is pretty delayed, these lots.
what?
I don't know
Sorry,
what that is.
someone
that way.
unmuted. We're good.
Okay, so you wanna, when you choose your vegetables, use fresh, high quality vegetables. If you say, oh, I'm gonna freeze these really old, crummy, limpy vegetables out of my bin and then use them later, you're gonna end up with crummy, wilty vegetables. So don't do that. Use really good quality vegetables before you start. And also wash them and cut them to the size you're gonna wanna use when you finally use them, because you're gonna use them without thawing them out. So it's gonna be hard to cut them before. So I've gotten my green beans and I've cut them into the size I want for the soup. I did that yesterday, so I have them here. And all you do is throw them into your blanching water. And you look up on your handy dandy freezing vegetable paper about how long to blanch them for. Turns out green beans are for 3 minutes. So I'll put my handy dandy timer on for 3 minutes and they can blanch it away. This freezing vegetable chart talks about how much time it takes to blanch each kind of vegetable, but there are some vegetables that you don't blanch. Like the first one I want to talk about is tomatoes. You can just freeze them whole, or you can blanch them just for less than a minute and the peels will come off, or you can freeze them whole and then the peels will come off. But you're not blanching in terms of the need to preserve them as they're vegetables. The other, let's see, what other vegetables that we don't want to blanch? Our chart says not to blanch hot peppers, but I also don't blanch sweet peppers or onions. I just cut up onions. In fact, when I'm cooking and recipe calls for half an onion or half a cup of onions, and I cut up a whole onion, I just cut the whole thing up and then I freeze what's left over. And then I have frozen chopped onions for next time. But I don't blanch them ahead of time, I just use them.
And which I think the chart is going to say, don't freeze chopped onions and it works fine. I agree with you, Ann.
And sweet peppers too, I think works
Yes.
fine.
Yeah.
I think you can't really hurt yourself with freezing. You might not
No.
like the result, but go ahead and try things. Okay. The other kind of thing that you don't blanch before you freeze it are beets, winter squash, pumpkins, sweet potatoes, and those you have to completely cook and then freeze them. So no blanching, but pre-cooking before you freeze that. So what I like to do in fall, when I get a lot of pumpkins and winter squash from my daughter, who's a farmer, is I cook and freeze those. So this is gonna be a pumpkin pie here. And this is gonna be a side dish of winter squash, of butternut squash, or maybe it'll end up as butternut squash soup. So that's something I like to do, it's easy.
And the important thing when you're doing quantities like that, or you're doing like a mashed package, is you want to put down on the package how much is in there. You're thinking right now, for example, any you might be thinking about using this for a particular thing, but then you look at it and you're thinking, how much is that? You can't really tell by looking at the
No,
package.
you can't.
So you want to put down the amount that you measured into that package.
But here's a nice mistake. I pulled this out of the freezer yesterday. First thing is it's probably the wrong kind of bag, and Joyce can talk about proper bags.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that.
But also it's totally unlabeled. So I'm pretty sure these are pieces of asparagus. But I don't know when this went in the bag. And I don't know how much, I can kind of guess how much, but it's not labeled.
The beans are blanched.
Oh, my beans are blanched. Oh, thank you. It's because I have an assistant here. She's helping me. Okay. Okay, my beans are blanched because I put the timer on. Going to pour out the hot water and then put in. What I like to do is have another big bowl of cold water and I put some ice in it. So we're gonna chill these, and you're gonna chill them for the same amount of time as you blanched them. Thank you for
When
doing
When
paper
I'm
cake.
blanching vegetables, now first of all, you want to make sure that you don't blanch any more than you are going to be able to cool and package in a short period of time. You want this to be as quick as possible. But what I like to do is get a bag of ice and put it in one unit of my sink, and then put cold water with it. And holy mackerel, that certainly does keep the vegetable cold. And then I make sure that the ice does not melt
Good.
too fast.
Too fast. Okay, so once they are blanched and cooled, and I'm not gonna wait for them to cool, you wanna dry them. So once these are cooled, I'm gonna put them on a very clean dish towel, or you could put them on paper. You wanna dry them out pretty well, especially if you're going to use a vacuum sealer. Being pretty dry is necessary, because we were experimenting yesterday and we found if they weren't dry enough, the vacuum sealer pulled water up and it didn't seal, it would cause holes. So anyway,
Well,
so
that's
I
a
got-
good thing to know.
yeah,
That's a good,
right,
yeah.
Use these for
Right.
that stuff.
right, but there's some other options. Okay, I'm gonna show you the use of the Food Saver. It happens to be the brand that I have. I believe there are other brands, but I'm gonna see if my technical assistant here, Ursula, is gonna.
Tilt down and to the
Tilt down.
left a little bit. There you go.
Okay, so this particular kind of sealer, it's called a Food Saver, and you can buy bags for it, but they come on a continuous roll, so you can make the bag whatever size you need it to be. And they have the wide ones, and they have the smaller ones. For this, I'm just gonna use the smaller ones, and you make your own bag. And I might have to ask Ursula to help me here. So you pull the bag out to give you as much space as you need. You cut your bag off. And you have a bag that's open in 2 ends. So then you put, can you see this okay? You
Yes,
put
it
this-
looks
oh,
good. Looks good,
Okay.
Ann.
You put your unsealed bag in and press the button. Oh, I'm supposed to press the
It's
button.
okay. So if you put it in and just don't do anything, it starts to vacuum. So when you're making the bottom edge of your bag, you stick it in there and then press the seal button as quickly as you can. And then I think
Did I
it's
screw up?
no, I think it's doing it.
Okay.
I think it did it.
You did? Oh, okay. Yeah. As you can see, I bought this gizmo and frankly, I hardly use it, but never mind. You can see one end is sealed. And so then you take your product and you put it in with very clean hands.
Yes, that's right. That's one of the benefits of having cleaned your hands.
Yeah. Okay. So once that's in like that,
You just put it in and don't press the button.
okay, my technical assistant's telling me, I just put it in and I don't press the button.
You don't have to press anything?
Not at this part, only to seal it.
Okay.
And now it's gonna suck air out.
Can you see it making a difference?
I think it's working. Just wait.
It's supposed to be working. Hello?
Turn that on.
All right, I'm gonna try this again. Oh, it's sealed without sucking the air.
Retry.
Okay.
So when you make the bottom of the bag, you cut the bag and then put it in there. And to make the bottom edge, to seal without vacuuming, you press the button. And then to seal with vacuuming, you just put it in there and it just automatically does it.
Like that.
There you go. All right.
And then you let it do it until it turns itself off and it goes poof and you can take it out. So we're waiting for the poof. Poof.
While we're waiting for the proof, is this a good time for some more questions?
Sure.
Great. I'll go with the one that's appropriate. Go ahead, Ann.
Oh, so here we have beans in a very sealed, airtight vacuum bag. Joyce, do you want to talk about why we even care about having it vacuum sealed?
Let's get some questions and maybe
Okay.
they will be answered at the same time.
Is a vacuum sealer worth the investment?
Depends on if you use it.
It depends if you use it. That's correct. Well, it does really take the air out. So that's a good thing. Joyce, after this, is going
Yes.
to talk about sealing without one of these machines,
Great.
Right.
which is not going to be as vacuumed as this is. So
But it's really close.
It's
really
close,
close.
so-
Very close.
no, depends if you're a gadget hawk or not,
Well, there you go, right there. Yes. And there are different costs. Different machines cost different amounts too.
Right.
And some of them are quite expensive, and some of them are quite a bit more reasonable. But you asked me, Ann, to mention why we want to get the air out, and that is because the real problem with that you can have with freezing foods and freezing vegetables, say in particular, is that any oxygen or moisture that crosses into that package, no matter what package it is going to cause some deterioration of that vegetable or food. And so you want to avoid getting some air, oxygen into the packaging. That's what the vacuum sealer does. It takes out all the air, and it also uses, I don't have one, so I don't know what the heaviness of that plastic is, but it
It's
looks
heavy.
like it's heavier than, say, just a zip top bag.
right.
But
Okay.
shall I go into the other ways, or?
No,
Oh,
not yet.
was it-
I've got two more things to show.
Okay.
Okay.
Um,
This packet type of system also comes with Ziplocs. So you can put your food into a Ziploc, but it's their particular kind of Ziploc. And then it has a little space here. Zip it closed. And then it has a little circle thing here. You can see it. So you
Oh,
take,
yeah.
you take your little accessory tool. And you put it,
Wait.
because you put it on that circle there, get your accessory. And it seals within the Ziploc.
And it took the oxygen out? We lost sound.
I'm not gonna, it would, if I let it go a little longer, but then that's sealed. Okay, and I'm not gonna be advertised for this, but there are other accessories that you can do it without the main thing. The third thing you can do is, you might notice that these are single-use plastics, which, is maybe not such a good thing these days. So you can actually use this system to seal in a mason jar. So that's pretty cool. So I'm gonna put beans in a small mason jar. You wanna leave headspace. I've got more headspace than I need here. And then you put just a regular lid for mason jar on top. Make sure, like you do for any canning, that it's clean and dry. And then there's these accessory tools where you just shove it onto the jar. And then you take your tools, you put the little hose thing in there. And then this is going to very loudly suck the air out of that
It makes such interesting sounds.
Yeah. So while that's doing its thing, it's done. Okay. So you take that apart, take this off.
Maybe.
Maybe, yeah, you take it off. And this is, there's a rubber gasket there. That's sealed. So now you can just use this, put this in the freezer, and there you go, without wasting, you know, a lot of plastic. So that's pretty cool. And they have an adapter for wide mouth as well as the narrow mouth or the regular mouth jars. Do you want to talk about some other things to freeze in, Joyce?
Well, I wanted to find out, Dorina, were there more questions that would be asked at that time?
This would be a great time to ask more questions. Thank
Okay.
you. So
Good,
there's,
I'll go let my cat out.
there's questions about blanching.
Okay.
So, and the questions are about when does the time start to count the blanching, and is the water boiling when you put it in, and does you have to wait to start the time when the water starts boiling again? So how do you measure time with
Excellent
blanching?
question.
Well, I
The
wait
water
till it-
should be boiling.
Right, and I
The
wait
water-
till it boils again, because if you're putting a lot in, it might really cool the water down. You want to bring it back to boiling.
You
Yes,
shouldn't be
Joy?
putting a lot in, and it should be boiling when you put the vegetable in, and you start the counting the time when it comes back to a boil. And
Right.
then you count your 2 or 3 minutes, whatever
Right.
that is. Yeah.
Okay, so you want to talk about other containers, then I'm gonna show some things and edit.
Nope, we're
Yeah.
not through, with
Give me a
questions
minute
yet.
to finish
Oh, I'm
asking.
sorry.
That's okay. The next question is about greens. What are your thoughts about freezing greens like chard and spinach and kale and so forth?
I'm gonna give that to Joyce.
Okay, you can certainly do it, and actually, you'll notice on your freezing vegetables chart. I think it's on the second page of the list of the different foods. It says greens, and it has all of those greens listed there, and it shows that blanching time for collards is 3 minutes, and for the other greens are 2 minutes. Now, I personally would prefer not to freeze those vegetables, because when I've got them, I want to just use them fresh. And, you know, everybody to their own, but I don't think that I'm not as fond of the quality of the frozen product for the greens.
And I think Dorina's gonna be sending out that chart from the So Easy to Preserve book about foods that don't freeze well.
Yeah, we already talked about that.
One of the items that we're gonna put into the soup is celery. That is on the list of does not freeze well. So for the soup that I'm making that we're gonna eat tonight, I've just got fresh celery, so I'm just gonna put that in there. But can I show some other things we're gonna put in? So I've
Now,
got.
okay,
Oh,
you
you're
want
gonna
to do
put
that?
other containers, Bryce.
Yes, I want to
Right.
show some other containers. Now, Anne has already showed you some of the different kinds of jars, you know, the quart and pint jars that can be used for freezing. And there are some other containers that are becoming more and more popular. And certainly you can use some hard plastic containers. You do want to make sure that any plastic container that you use is thick. It isn't really lightweight. It is not recommended that you use something like a cottage cheese or a sour cream or yogurt container, because there's a great chance that they are, first of all, letting some air and moisture through the plastic. They are not that thick that they keep the moisture and air out. Plus, they can get brittle when they freeze. And if they happen to hit something like the floor or even another product that you've got in your freezer, there's a good chance that they could break or crack. And then you've got your product is going to be, you know, questioned, and you're going to wonder how you're going to keep it frozen. But I mean, you can use things like plastic bags. I don't recommend like the store plastic bags because they're very porous and you don't want them single. However, if you want to wrap something tightly with vinyl wrap or with even aluminum foil, and as you wrap it as tightly as you can, and then put it into a plastic bag so that you are essentially double packaging. That's something that you can do, and you're going to help to maintain your quality better. If something comes in a plastic container, you don't want to just pop it in the freezer like that. You might even pop that in a plastic bag or something similar before you put it in the freezer. And I'll talk about meat in just a little bit. There are some delightful creatures, shall we say, that have come up in the market recently. And these are silicone packages. This is a silicone package and it's clear on one side so that you can easily see what's in there. And it sits on itself, it has a flat bottom. And these are a stasher and are very highly recommended. And this is called Zip Top. And this is 3 of them. And you can get these in lots of different sizes and shapes for that matter. And these are highly recommended for freezing. And because of the silicone, they do not let any air or moisture through. And when you're going to use them, you put your product in the container and then you simply zip it closed. Now these can be a little trickier. We're going to do a little experiment here, but these can be a little trickier because of the fact that they are a heavier duty. They don't squash as easily. Because I'm going to show you, let's see, how was I going to do this now? I had it all figured out earlier. So this is a plastic bag. Doesn't seem like it's, that heavy, but it is actually a freezer bag, and it is heavy enough that it will protect the food from any moisture and any oxygen. So there is one method of freezing, and I've done some berries here that I like to use the tray method to freeze, whereas I've put parchment paper onto a baking tray and then put the berries individually on this tray so that they would not be a clump of berries when I froze them. So then I'm going to put them in this bag, and I want to show you one way that you can get the air out. And I'll do this as quickly as I can. It wouldn't work very well to put a funnel up here because I'd end up with the majority of them on the floor, I'm afraid. But I do this method a lot with blueberries and some vegetables. Actually, you could do this with the green beans if you wanted to make sure that you had a whole lot of green beans in one bag. Then you could put them all in one bag. And then if you don't have one of those handy dandy vacuum machines, you could do this. And it is thought to be quite adequate. So you want to get your package. I hope you can see that well enough. Let me just take it to this side. There's nothing. Want to get it even. And then you're going to fold it onto itself so that you are essentially squeezing the air out in that way. And then you can seal it and it's ready to put in the freezer. Using any of these zip tops I find quite challenging sometimes. And so I may have to finish zipping this closed. There, now it got, once it gets started, it goes like gangbusters.
So
then
while
I'm
you're
gonna squeeze out.
struggling with that, did you wash
Yes.
those berries before you froze them?
Yes, I did. I put them on a towel so that they can also dry very well. Otherwise, you end up with a lot of crystals, ice crystals in your berries, and then well, that's added moisture, And also they get soggy then when you defrost them. So you can see that there is some, I don't know if you can see, I can see that there's many air in this package. So they are ready to go in the freezer. Another way, oh yes, another way you can remove air is, now I like to buy my local bread by the loaf, unsliced, because I like to slice it the width that I like, which is usually thinner than their bread machine. And then I like to freeze at least half a loaf so that I can take it out by chunks. Well, you can see that my bread didn't really fit well, as far as there's a big air pocket here and there's some more air up here. So I have partially closed this bag. Rolling it would not work. First, I would squash my bread. And second, it wouldn't take care of the air pockets. But one thing that you can do is use a straw. So you close up the majority of the bag and you put it in just the small opening that is left. And I'm hoping that you will be able to see this because it's really quite profound. So, okay, then you suck in and you essentially remove the air. And after you've sucked all the air out, then you finish the zipping and it's ready to go in the freezer. So,
Woohoo, well done.
voila.
Joyce, can you tell us that bag that you brought out when you had the berries in the freezer? There was a large bag covering
Oh,
your.
that was simply another one of these freezer appropriate bags. I like to cover my food with whatever it is if I've got it on a tray freezing. I don't like to leave it in the freezer uncovered. I know some people do, and that's your own preference. It's just not mine.
And what can you tell us about freezer burn? Is it water and or air that causes freezer burn?
Actually, it's a combination. It can be a combination. And freezer burn, it is not harmful in that it does not rot the product. Okay, the product is still okay, but that freezer burn section may taste pretty ranchy, right? It may not taste good. And so if you have, and it usually is time related, so that it's something that has been in the freezer longer than it really should have been. And that's one reason why you want to date things, because 5 years down the line, it's just not going to be the same product as it was when you first put it in. But you can cut off those freezer burn parts and it still can be used. Say if it's a piece of meat, you can still use that piece of meat. I definitely would recommend that you cut that off, because where meat is concerned, it really can cause quite a change in the flavor of that particular part. Okay?
Okay. Any more
Okay.
questions, Dorina?
Yeah, I'll switch over to you, Anne, because the question is for you.
Okay.
The lid that you showed us, your machine, do you reuse that lid? No, sorry, from the jar.
The
on jar.
lid. Well, I have experimented and I've used jar lids that I've previously used, and they seem to work well. If it's really bent a lot, I wouldn't think it would work, but I found it worked okay. But you can try it, and if it doesn't seal, then try another one.
Those are all the
I
questions.
found
for
it
now.
worked.
So that's all the questions for now.
Okay, well, so we're gonna finish our soup here. I got to tell you though, this simmering vegetables are smelling really good. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna finish our soup. I always put the celery, the broth. I'm gonna throw in some onions. I'm gonna throw in some previously frozen green beans, and notice I don't have to thaw them out before I put them in. I'm gonna throw in some carrots that are pre-frozen on the bag, but I also want to show you some carrots that I froze in a jar. Now, I'm gonna date myself. To open a jar with a vacuum is pretty tough if you've ever had lots of jars that you buy. You can buy something called a jar key, which is really cool. I buy them at Bed Bath & Beyond, but I'm sure it's other places. However, this one's broken its lid. It's supposed to just use this, pull it up and it breaks the seal. You could take the thing off. But for those of us of a certain age, we might still have a couple of what you call church keys. They came from beer companies when you had to open a can of beer with either a top or a puncture it. So these also can be used to, break the seal on a jar. Until did you hear that?
Yeah.
Break the seal, and then you've got your frozen things and you can throw it in. So I'm putting in that, and then the other thing I want to put in is some herbs, some seasoning. You can of course use any dry herbs that you want, but I pre-froze some basil. You see that in an ice cube tray, and I have little cubes of basil, so I can throw one of those in there. So now I'm just gonna let that cook, but I did want to show you a couple of other things that you can freeze. You probably know, I've heard a rumor that you get a lot of zucchini in the summer, more than you probably need. Well, what I like to do is shred it and then freeze it and then use it during the year, either to make zucchini soup or make zucchini muffins. And then if you have your zucchini muffins and you make more than you can eat at once, or more than you should eat at once, you can freeze your muffins after they're cooked. So that works. I know Joyce said she freezes cookies. Do you do that, Joyce?
Oh, you betcha. That way I won't eat the whole batch all at one fell swoop.
Right. So again, we just throw in all of our products frozen into the pot. And when you're gonna cook your frozen vegetables, you cook them without thawing them out first. But they're already partly cooked because the blend, so don't overcook them. Now what I'm gonna do is just throw in a package of frozen chicken that I've already cut into bite-sized pieces. And then unless there's some questions, I'm gonna turn it over to Joyce to talk about freezing meat and especially safety for freezing meat. So I'm just gonna open this bag. And she can talk about,
I can talk about all sorts of things, and two of the things that I'm going to talk about
Right.
are some of the things that I forgot to talk about before.
okay,
And,
so we're just gonna now be cooking this. Joyce, it's yours.
Okay, and so I recently made some winter squash soup, and one thing that I wanted to kind of look at with you all is how one of these new silicone containers can be used and that we can get the air out of it. So I have put this soup into this new container. I want you to know, I just got these today. So this truly is an experiment that you are helping me with. Now, another way that you can get the air out of a package is I've got this container about 1/3 of the way full of water. And I've closed this zipper on this silicone container most of the way. And then I'm going to stick it into the water so that the water comes up to, almost up to the top. And essentially what it is doing is forcing any air out of the top. And so this is now how it looks. And you can't really tell this very clearly from there. I can tell that. But with a heavier plastic bag like this, now this is plastic, it is not a silicone, but it's a heavy duty and it's meant for freezing. And it would probably tell maybe a little bit more clearly, but this does not have a flat bottom. And I tell you, soup is not something that I would put into this, but putting something else into it and then using this submersion technique for getting rid of the air would be another thing to, another way to get the air out. And then I didn't even mention, of course, there are the Pyrex containers with the lids that seal on top that are excellent for using in the freezer. Again, you want to leave a little bit of space at the top, and you can get good plastic containers that can be used and that won't allow any kind of odors or flavors to cross through the plastic. They are a little heavier duty plastic. You want to check on the label of your plastic product and make sure that it is recommended for freezing. If it doesn't say that, it may not be of a thickness that is going to hold up for freezing. Okay, and then on to meat. The meat you want to be very careful with. And this is something that you want to make sure is well wrapped so that you aren't getting any oxygen into the wrapped product.
I'll let it cool down a little bit.
Okay, now
It's
I didn't have any meat,
this
and so I have 2 blocks of wood
Yeah.
that are going to be my meat for the night. And what you want to do before you put the meat into any kind of a final package is you want to wrap it in something like a butcher paper or even aluminum foil. Now, just as a demonstration, I'm going to use parchment paper, which is not something that you should use as one of the base wrapping products because it is too thin. And your butcher paper has some kind of a plastic or wax finish on one side that helps to keep the air out. Well, parchment paper doesn't have that. But now, can you see what you want to do to wrap your meat? Now is when I wish I had longer arms. Hang on just a second.
Just want to say real quick while she's doing that, a little about labeling. When you get the plastic jars, I'm going to talk a tiny bit about labeling really quick. When you have the zipper bags that are meant for freezing, they're going to have a part on it that you can write on. So I can use a waterproof pen, a Sharpie, or a big fat one, or a wax pen to write on the bags. Or if you're freezing in a jar, I just use address labels and write on that. So those are some things I use just to label. Now, Joyce can get back.
Okay, and I don't use those. I use masking tape, and then I write the product and the date down on the masking tape and put it onto the package. Okay, so what we are going to do is I'm going to show you how you should use butcher paper. There's 2 ways that you can use butcher paper to completely encase tightly the piece of meat that you're wrapping. And this one is going to be harder in some ways and easier in others because it is a block of wood, which is somewhat harder than pieces of meat that you might have. So you want to take and go to the corner and put your paper over your corner, and then take it on either side so that you are tightly putting the paper along the meat. And then after you have both of those corners, then you want to meat is also a little more pliable. And you want to fold the other part along until you got it. And you might want to fold it under. Oh, this is less than smooth, isn't it? Like that, and then tape it at the end, and then you can label it on the other side. The other way you can wrap it is to, let's see if I made the paper big enough. You can take it up to the center and fold it in small folds so that you again take the paper down to the meat. You don't just wrap or I can make it quite big enough. If you take these together and then fold it down, there, I have one. You can see that there, it's more than 2 thicknesses there. Then you want to, again, tighten that down. Make your triangle at the ends. And then fold it under. And then you can tape the bottom, the 2 sides there, and then label your product out. Or you can put this into another container. And it could be something like one of these, but perhaps not this one. I didn't check my blocks of the sizes of my blocks of wood against my plastic products here before. But this actually works because you've already taken a lot of the air away from the meat.
It's not so happy.
I know.
And then you can, if you want to take even more, you can use the straw method and even the submersion method to get the rest of the air out. And there you have your final meat product. Any questions on that?
Yes. Are butcher paper and freezer paper the same thing?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I would check the butcher paper in particular. Freezer paper is going to be a thicker paper. Okay, butcher paper, I don't know if it would, by definition, have a heavier finish or something like a wax or a plastic finish on the inside. I don't know that.
Great. Silicone bags, are they reusable?
Yes.
Where did you find them?
Okay.
And how do you label
Hang on, I've got to fix this camera again.
them? All right.
I don't have an Ursula. Yes, the silicone bags, that's one of their big advantages, is that they are not a single-use bag. They can be used over and over and over again when you wash them. And you usually want to wash them, well, actually, no, I can't say that. Some of them you can wash in the dishwasher. I'm not exactly sure how well that would work. And some of them it is not recommended at all. You would hand wash them, but they are definitely reusable. And where did I get them? These particular ones are made in the USA, and I'm not sure how many of these various products are made in the USA, but this one I got straight from the company, which is called Zip Top. And they are also available on Amazon for pretty much the same price. Stasher is this other one that is very highly recommended. And these are, I'm saying highly recommended because of the fact that they have the flat bottom, so that you can actually easily load them without worrying about them falling over, okay? And these also are available on Amazon if you like to shop at Amazon. And they are also available at Bed Bath & Beyond locally. And I don't know where else they might be available. Were there any others?
Yeah, Scotch tape, does it stick to the silicone? When
Scotch
you
tape?
lay it?
I
Or
don't
whatever
know.
you use?
As I say, I just got these today. So I haven't
Yeah.
really, I haven't done any experiment. And I don't usually use Scotch tape, but I use masking tape. But let's see if the masking tape
Yes,
sticks.
my mistake, masking tape, yes.
Okay,
We're about to find out.
we are
Show-
about to find out. Ready? Ready?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
No, it does not stick. How's that, huh? So I'm going to have to find a new way. And I don't like to use a pen on my containers primarily because sometimes it doesn't come off. For example, I have a bag here that I had, this is a freezer bag, and it had 5 pounds of something in it, 2 pounds of something in it. And yeah, the 2 pounds are still there. So I'm gonna have to, if anybody has some suggestions on some other ways of labeling that it can be removed so that you don't have to be crossing out and remarking with an indelible pen, I'd love to hear about it. Any other questions?
That's all for now.
All right. Where are we? Oh, you know, one thing that we didn't talk about, well, maybe I did a little bit, and that was the thawing. And I did mention that most things, it is recommended that you defrost in the refrigerator. That is the strongest recommendation, whether it be meat or whether it be soups and stews and things like that, that you do it in the refrigerator, not on the counter. And if you do it in any other way, like the microwave or in cold water, then you should use it right away. Meat, you just have to plan ahead. If you've got a big chunk of meat that you want to use, then you really have to plan ahead, in many cases, a couple of days in order for it to thaw in time for you to use it when you want to use it. Okay. Anne?
And then what I'm gonna do is I've got enough of that tomato thawed out so that I can just pour that whole thing out because it's a wide mouth. I'm gonna let that thaw out, and that's gonna be dinner. Okay, sorry for the interruption, but it's
No problem.
It's smelling good.
I bet it is.
Yeah.
What time should
Okay,
I be there?
Oh, I think about 7:30 would be good. I'll have to get some bread. Dorina, were there more questions before we move on to fruit? We're kind of getting short on time. We need to get
Sure.
fruit.
Sure. If you're defrosting in the refrigerator and you choose not to use some of the product, if it is still frozen, is it safe to put back in the freezer?
Yes, it is. It is. In fact, you can as long as you can refreeze just about anything, okay, as long as it hasn't come up to room temperature. But again, you're going to decrease the quality of your product. So that, let's say it's green beans and you had a big bag and you took out what you wanted to use and then you forgot to put it back in the freezer, what was left over. As long as it is partially frozen, it has some ice crystals in it, you're fine in putting it back in the freezer, and probably you're not going to decrease the quality. But you do want to keep those foods frozen as much as possible.
Some great suggestions on your silicone markers at Stasher. Stasher says to use dry erase markers, but there's also the suggestion of freezer tape.
Freezer tape, okay. All right, that is something I have never invested in. I'll have to look into that. Does this person know for sure that freezer tape works on silicone?
That was a suggestion.
Oh, okay. Because I wonder.
Do you do all of this in your refrigerator freezer, or do you actually have a deep freeze need, or is a deep freezer needed?
Okay, that's a really good question, because one thing Ann and I haven't mentioned is freezer temperatures. And you want, first of all, you want foods to freeze as quickly as possible. And so when you, for example, if Ann were doing 10 pounds of green beans today, and she was doing these 1 pound packages, and she had 10 packages, she would not want them to be all stacked and put in the freezer to freeze. She wants to piece them out into different areas of the freezer and going to the coldest part of the freezer that's possible. A 0 degree freezer or lower is the best. I happen to have a 0 degree refrigerator freezer, so which is hunky dory peachy keen. But then I also have a deep freeze, and so I can use either. But If you do not have a 0-degree refrigerator freezer and you don't have a deep freeze, then you simply don't want to be freezing anything for very long. And I don't know what the time limit would be, but your quality would definitely decrease over time.
Great, thank you. That's all for now.
Okay, I
Whoa.
have something I wanted to share. This is gonna be a chicken rice soup, so I'm gonna throw the rice in here now. But Joyce, when we were preparing this, I said, you can't freeze rice, and she said, oh, no. She had
Oh,
this
yes.
really cool thing about rice.
Yeah,
If
I
you'll
freeze
share it.
rice all the time. I live by myself, and rice can take, I use only brown rice, and it can take 45 minutes to cook. And so, well, so then there's also that I don't like to just use rice alone. So I usually will combine rice, brown rice, and let's see, could be wheat berries, could be oat groats, could be barley, might be all of those. And I will put them into the water, and I don't have a rice cooker. I'm old school, and cook it, and then I'll have a lot of my rice product there. And so I will have one meal of it, and I might save some in the refrigerator for a meal later that week. But the rest of it, I will put into a container or various containers, depending on how I'm going to use it, and freeze it. And it freezes beautifully. And I do that all the time. Yeah. But not noodles.
Not noodles.
No, noodles don't freeze so well.
Okay, Joyce, you're on for, we gotta really zip through the fruit business. So you wanna talk about that to begin with, and we can talk a little bit more about different types of freezing for that?
Okay, well, there's basically 3 different ways that you can freeze fruit. One would be with a syrup, and your freezing fruit handout has the information on making your own syrup. I know that some people prefer to use honey instead of using white sugar, and that is perfectly allowable. Your proportions may be a little bit different, and you may do your own experimentation. There isn't any specific rule as to the thickness or thinness of the syrup. And then the other would be the sugared method, where sugar would be mixed in with the fruit, and then it would be packaged. And then the other would be dry, which I already showed you with the berries. And with the syrup, you would usually have your fruit in the container, and then you would put the juice or the syrup in there, and you want that fruit to stay submerged. You want it to be, again, out of the air. Some fruits you want to treat with something like ascorbic acid or something like fruit fresh, and that way it won't turn brown. But then also by putting something like some crumpled up wax paper or parchment paper, not newspaper, in the top of your container, and then closing it up, that will help to eliminate some of the air, and it will also keep the fruit submerged in the syrup. And with the that could be true also with the sugared fruit. I'm trying to remember exactly what they said about the sugared. Yeah. And so it's basically the same, except that sometimes you don't need that layer of some type of paper to weigh it down. And then the dry pack is simply putting the fruit on a tray and freezing it in pieces, and then switching it to another container. Again, packaging it so that you can eliminate as much of the air as possible.
Yeah, Joyce, let me show you, when and then the fruit that I process or prepare first are like apples, pears, peaches, but when I have apples, have an apple tree. So I freeze the pieces on a tray, but I also sprinkle them with some lemon juice, because I always put lemon into the pie or the cobbler, anywhere. But if I was not wanting that lemon flavor, that's when I would use the fruit fresh or ascorbic acid. When I don't want the lemon.
So the apples that are in that package, is that enough apples for one pie?
Yeah, I like a really high pie.
Okay, so then, do you ever put the sugar for the pie in with your apples at the same
Yeah,
time?
sometimes I put everything in, the
Uh-huh.
flour, the sugar, the cinnamon, everything, but this is just apple, but sometimes I
Sure.
do everything, I can just dump the whole thing. They say just to use it frozen, but frankly, I like to thaw out the peaches or the apple first and then drain off some of the liquid so that my cobbler or a pie is not so runny. The book doesn't say that, but that's what I do.
Yeah, well, I know that I think I mentioned to you, Anne, that my daughters and I love this particular apricot crumb pie recipe that I have. And so I froze apricot halves using trays 1 year and decided, all right, I'm going to freeze these in packages just big enough to make that apricot crumb pie. And so then when my girls came to visit, we made we made the pie, and there was apricot juice everywhere, everywhere. And it was that they lost their juice as
Yeah.
they were cooking, and we enjoyed the juice too, but it just wasn't the same.
Right. Also, when I cook, I have also lucky enough to have a beauty plum tree. And so here's enough beauty plum that's already kind of smashed up, enough for a recipe of jam. So I marked it, but there I could just use a regular freezer thing and close it close to the top so I really don't have any air in it.
Yeah,
And I
they
don't
look,
treat that at all.
they're gorgeous.
Yeah, the plums don't need any added lemon when you're making jam, so no lemon. So that's a real easy thing to do, and I have stacks of those in my freezer. And also what I like to do is, like you, I freeze on a tray blueberries and blackberries that I have in my yard. And then I put them in a bag and I just take out a handful at a time and put them in the microwave and nuke them for like 30 or 45 seconds, and they're almost like fresh, and then put them on
Yeah.
yogurt or cereal or something, or ice cream. So
You know, another food that I forgot to mention, and you mentioned how you do your tomatoes. And 1 year I was given a whole bunch of tomatoes, and I didn't have time to really process them by any means right away. And so I took the tops out, the cores out, and I then just stuck them in a freezer bag and closed them up, threw them in the freezer. And you know, when they come out, the peel comes off just as if you blanched them.
exactly.
It's quite beautiful.
Yeah. Anything
Yeah.
else we need to say about the fruit? Because I think we need some time for questions, or any favorites that you
Right.
like to freeze? Any other weird
Yes.
things that you
One
like?
one other weird thing, and that is ginger root.
What?
Ginger root.
Ginger? Oh,
I always get my my piece of ginger, put it in a baggie and stick it in the freezer. And then, I mean, you don't usually use a whole ginger root for a recipe. And
No.
I find that when you take it out of the freezer, many times I will just grate it right off of the frozen chunk. And that includes the skin as well as the ginger itself. But if a recipe specifically says that you peel it, then I find it's really easy to peel in the frozen state. And then it grates very easily also.
I know you talked also about freezing zest.
Yes.
From-
Oh, yes. Yeah, my daughter actually turned me on to that. And I again, you know, a lot of the times you just need a small amount of zest, a teaspoon, a tablespoon, or something like that. And if you've got oranges, lemons, limes, and you want to hold on to some zest, then put it in a little container and put it in your freezer, label it, and it comes out very easily into, you know, the small particles. It's great. It's really handy. And
Another thing that's cool is if you do any Japanese cooking is stir frying. If your
Uh-huh.
meat is semi-frozen, when you slice it, it's easier to slice on the thin kind of meats for a stir frying.
And
So
you and
partly
I
frozen.
you and I do the same thing with tomato paste. And that is,
Oh, yeah,
I never
right.
use a whole can of tomato paste. And so I will empty what I don't use into a baggie, and then I can open up one small part of it and squeeze it out or break off a chunk and get it out when I need to use it. And the other thing was, did you tell me, or did somebody else tell me about making coffee cubes?
Oh, right. Yeah, a friend of mine the other day said that she likes iced coffee, but she doesn't like to dilute it. So she makes coffee and she freezes the coffee in ice cube trays. And then when she's cooling her coffee for iced coffee, she puts in the frozen cubes of coffee. So, I mean, kind of this whole freezing thing, you can use your imagination.
Yeah,
Really, almost anything you can think of is gonna probably be okay.
yeah, you're right. You're right. Okay, Dorina, do we have any questions?
Well, we do, but I also want to let everybody know.
Wait,
Hello?
you're on mute, Dorina.
Yes, you are so very correct. Wanted to let everybody know, I put the link for the evaluation in the chat. We would love your feedback in order to improve our programming. So any and all feedback is encouraged. And yeah, I'll get you the rest of the questions. It looks like there might only be one more, but they may pour in now. So is this regarding a sweetener? Does stevia work the same as sugar or honey?
Pretty much, you have to really watch your amounts. Stevia is really sweet. And so you want to know the proportions that you like in your food. But it is my understanding that you can freeze it.
And there are not any more questions. So before you all depart, thank you again so much for attending tonight's Third Thursday, and a big gratitude and a virtual hug, Joyce and Anne, for volunteering your time, expertise, energy to make these happen. Huge.
Thank you.
Thank
You're very
you.
welcome.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah. And if anybody wants to unmute themselves and interact right now with Joyce and Anne, you may do so.
There's one other product I forgot to mention that I freeze. And that
What?
is if I've canned in a wide mouth jar and it didn't seal, I will freeze it. I canned some garbanzo beans,
Right.
and a couple of my jars didn't seal, and so they have enough of a headspace that they can be safely frozen, and very successfully. It works really well.
That is an excellent suggestion.
Thank you.
I've never thought of that. I'm not able to access the poll. Uh-oh. Has anyone else been able to successfully access the poll?
The poll.
What's the poll?
In the chat, an evaluation. I put an evaluation in the chat. Let me try this one. Let's try this.
Check.
Here's another possible link.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, all right. I think the first one should work, but let me try it again. I tried the second one I sent and it didn't work, but I'll try the first one again.
I don't want to click off of it yet.
Not yet.
But just so you guys all
Oh,
know,
don't pay attention. So the poll, if it says the lemon in the front, I just forgot to change that this is the freezer one. So I know that this is the freezer one. So all the responses that you'll give, I know are for freezer. So I apologize. I remembered the last minute that I didn't finish up the poll or the evaluation. Like, oh, shucks. So sorry if that was confusing, but it'll work. All your responses I know are going to be for the freezer demonstration. Sorry about
okay, you're not going to just think that it was all lemon, right?
Yeah, so sorry about that confusion. Any more questions? questions?
Be famous. Suki.
I had asked a question in the chat, but I think it was in the middle of the survey debacle and it got kind of buried. But when you were mentioning that sometimes if you have a jar that fails to seal, you'll go through the freezing process for that.
Right.
Do you, I mean, you obviously have to cool it before you won't just put it directly in the freezer. So do you like put it in the refrigerator for a certain amount of time before transferring it to the freezer? Or what does that process look like?
Absolutely, absolutely. You don't want to put hot foods in your freezer because it warms up your freezer for one thing and warms up the other food in the freezer. And it also can add condensation to the freezer itself. So you definitely want to cool it down to refrigerator temperature before you put it into the freezer and label it, of course.
Okay. So do you find that process is normally like do you throw it in there and leave it overnight kind of thing, then transfer it to the freezer the next morning, or like is it all just kind of like whenever it's cool enough?
Whenever it is cold, not just cool, but cold. And it usually, if it like the garbanzos, they were in a pressure canner. That's really hot. And so it's got to cool down, first of all, on the counter for a couple of hours before I put it in my refrigerator. And then, yes, it would be overnight for sure in order to be cold enough because it's a pint jar also. If you're using a small jar, like I've done this with jams also, and it doesn't take as long to cool down a half pint jar.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for participating.
And that was Taylor, who's a ferment.
Well, hi there, fermenting Taylor.
Hello.
Let's see. Yes, I will be sending the handout I forgot, which is the list of foods that do not freeze well.
Maybe.
Maybe I'll be maybe.
Well, for sure, don't do lettuce. Don't do lettuce.
Don't do lettuce. Don't do
No.
cream sauces.
No.
All right. Well, Joyce and Ann, again, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Making this
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
glad to be here. with
Thanks for being our engineer.
you.
And thank you to Ursula. Ursula, you were a great right hand.
Hello. She got to be on screen.
Thank you
She's
for
very,
having
she's
me.
very
Thank
cute.
you,
Yeah,
Ursula.
it was great,
I got
Ursula.
a new shirt today.
You
so
had some valuable things to help Ann with.
Yes, she did.
thanks. Yeah, it was fun. But to learn.
Mhm. Great. Well, that looks like
Okay.
Marmalade.
I think we're good. You're getting hearts, getting applause, little action items there. You're getting all of it.
And somebody just said, have a lovely weekend. And I say the same to them.
I'll remove the spotlight and remove the spotlight. So we're back in. I didn't.
And
remove-
Zach and Pat, I don't know if you're still on, but if you did, Art, I hope you have a nice weekend.
Oh, sorry, Joyce. I stopped your video accidentally. I was trying to remove the spotlight and I stopped your video. So sorry.
Are we, what does my screen say now? The host has asked you to start your video? Oh, no.
I did. I'm so sorry. Asked to start video.
You didn't know that I was just going to keep talking, huh? Okay.
Learning as we go. There
Yep.
we go. All right.
Yes, there were some friends of mine from the Bay Area, Pat and Zach Hanscom, that
Oh,
I
great.
don't know if they're still on, but
I don't see them.
Yeah.
Do not see them. All right. Well, Anne,
Okay.
looks like you've got dinner taken care of.
It's all done. We're putting it right now. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
good timing.
Yes.
All right,
perfect.
everybody. Good
All
night.
right. Thanks again.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thank you both.